you folks become beekeepers as opposed to bee havers. There are a lot of bee havers in the world. They have bees for a season, they die, they buy them for the next year, have them for another year, and they die. So this year, hopefully, we get you set up so you can keep bees year round. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm Philip Duncan. I'm the president of the Midwestern Beekeeping Association. We also have some of the members and board members on here. So if you're on here, just wave your hand. Okay. So these are the folks you would actually see in person should we ever have another in-person meeting, which I'm hoping that happens, especially since they lifted some of the restrictions yesterday. So maybe we can next month or two actually have in-person classes. Just got a little bit of housekeeping. We've already been taken care of. Eric has muted everybody's mics here because there'll be a lot of background noise in there. If you do have questions, we've got the chat feature here. Go down there and type in your questions. So basically, if you have a question about a presentation, type it in there. If there's time at the end of their presentation and we can go through a couple of questions, we'll do that. But like I said, we have got a schedule we're trying to maintain. But we are going to have some probably 30 to 45 minutes at the end of the session today for a question and answer, and we can go through all the questions. So hopefully get all these things covered for you. Little bit of background here. We do have a student scholarship beekeeping group. We've got 4 students on here. We've got, I'll get them off. We've got Kaylee and Kyler Blessing and Eli and Josh Millard. You can see them up there. If their camera's on, the wave. Yeah. This is a special classroom, and they took the class last year. And this year they take it again. And after they complete the class here, they're going to be getting something special. They're going to be getting all their equipment and their bees. And we'll get them down the road to become beekeepers here. Hope, assuming as the ice melts and we actually get warm weather. And there's Kaylee and Kyler, sorry. But our scholarship here is something we've done for several years. So we had a lot of kids have been successful with this. We're also going to have a couple of people on a little later. One of them will be Kyle Day. He's a past scholarship student. He's currently I think the secretary of the Missouri State Beekeepers Association. Another beekeeper presenter would be Hannah Gephardt. She is a past honey ambassador, as Kyle was, for the Missouri State Beekeepers Association. So they're presenting later today. But you're going to get a lot of information. As I mentioned, the Q&A questions session at the end. So submit your questions on the chat here, and we'll kind of take care of that. Our first presenter is Tom Britz right there. So we'll have to unmute Tom's mic. Hopefully Eric can do that.
Tom should be able to unmute himself.
Good morning, everybody.
Okay, so Tom's going to be presenting on honeybee biology. So I'll turn it over to him. Tom's got a presentation.
Everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Yes, like Phil said, I'm Tom Britz, and I've been attempting to teach this course since 2014. And we're going to try to get our, we're having a little bit of trouble here, folks.
Eric, have you set Tom up to share this, to have control so we can do his presentation?
I'll go back.
First, I have to ask him to share his screen. So now he's got that.
There we go.
Now
Are you getting that?
Now I can spotlight his video.
Oh.
Sure. Now, is that working?
Yeah, we can see you. And there you
Is that working?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. All right. Well, we can get right into it. Like I said, I've been teaching it since 2014, and every year when I look over things, I learn something, and I've misspoke on or flat right told wrong, and I try to correct myself every year. It's just little things normally. But if I could get this to advance, I would. How do I advance it? Okay, what we want to remember is that first thing you need to know, all bees have three sections. They have their head, and they have their thorax, and they have their abdomen. Now, honeybees actually don't have any bones at all. They have what is called, like any insect, exoskeleton, and it's just a rigid external covering. It's covered layers of wax and things of this nature, and just no bones at all inside. It's just the fluid. And the exoskeleton has a purpose in that it prevents the bees from growing continually. Instead, they've got to shed their skins periodically during the larva stages, and they stay the exact same size once they emerge as an adult. And also another interesting thing about bees is they have what you call an open circulatory system. They take in the air in spiracles on the segments of their thorax, and that's how they breathe. They really don't have any lungs or anything. Their cavities are just full of a fluid. And basically the little hairs you see on the bees, they're all for sensory purposes. I guess because they work in the dark, you know. And one of the really critical things that the bees depend on to communicate is pheromones. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And the pheromones help ensure normal functioning, or they can be an alarm, you know. And that's the center of everything. That's where it all starts, right there. And this is just a basic drawing of a bee's head. As you've always heard, bees have 5 eyes. They got the 2 compound eyes on either side of the head. And then on top, as you can see, they have the ocelli. I don't know if that pointer is showing or not, but my mouse pointer is showing on my screen. It may not be showing, but
It is showing up, Tom.
What's that?
Your mouse is showing up. We can see your mouse.
Good. I'll try to watch it then, not use it all the time. The head of the honeybee is where they have their sense of vision, taste, and smell, and the foods are received and processed. Not processed, but received here and input. Honeybees, you know, in a natural environment, they'll live inside a tree cavity, or I've seen over in the Far East, living in rock crevices and whatnot. I'm sure everybody's seen that. Well, anyway, they live in there because that's what they prefer. They fill everything up with honeycomb, and so everything they smell and touch, it's got to be important. So, you know, for them, they can't see, but they can feel and smell, and that's how they go on. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. Now, these are the mandibles. The proboscis is how you say it. The mandibles are like, to me, I think of them, and they're really not teeth, but they use them for so many things. They're a tool. They can pick up stuff. They can just shape wax and do all kinds of different things with their mandibles. And their proboscis is their tongue. And actually, this tongue is kind of like a straw-like thing, and it's got little hairs on it that moves liquid, such as water and nectar, really, really quick. It goes really quick. And there's sensory hairs on the proboscis to enable the bees to detect numerous sugar, salts, and better stuff that they may not want. Next thing we're going to talk about is the queen pheromones. Now, all bees, worker bees have pheromones, queen bee has her pheromones. And one of the most vital pheromones, a pheromone is a scent or a smell. And it's really important, especially for the queen. And her chemicals are just, they just decide the direction of the entire hive as far as that goes. When they get irritated, probably something wrong with the queen. And we'll talk more about that as time goes on. And this is the thorax. This is the midsection of the bee. And the thorax is divided into 3 segments. If you can see the seams right here is the segments of the thorax. They're kind of a little seam right there. We're right at every one of them segments. Is everybody remember me talking about the spiracles where they bring in oxygen? Well, this is one thing that I learned this year a little more detail, is that's where they'll take in their oxygen, is these seams, like it's coats of armor or sections of armor is the way I look at it. And that's where they take in air, and then their wings are attached. They've got 4 wings. They got their main wing on the front here, and then they got their hind wing. Well, there's a hook. There's a hook and anchor system here between the hind wing and the forewing that they hook together, and they work in harmony, and it works out real good for them that way. Now, we got the front leg and the hind leg. Okay, and this front leg, I want everybody to look at this. This has always amazed me. This is an antenna cleaner. If the bees, they're going around working flowers, if they get their antenna, now you got to remember their antenna is what they use for a lot of their sensory things. And if it gets pollen on it and stuff, they don't get good readings. So they'll actually put their little antenna right in here and run it through there. And I always thought of it like a farmer, when he wipe his nose the old fashioned way. But that's what that's for. This is just a different segments, I guess you'd call it, the leg. Whoops, sorry. Went the wrong way there, folks. And the hind leg back here. Now, on the hind leg, I wish I could get rid of this. Yeah, the pollen basket right here. And anybody's kept bees at all, I know seen it, but for all you new beekeepers, it's such a fascinating spring. One of the most fascinating things you'll see as a new beekeeper is early in the spring when that pollen is coming in, and these little things are just popping with pollen. And it can be a blaze orange or a yellow or a bright red, or it could be so many different colors. And these rest of these little segments are just, they got little points on them, and they've also got little suckers on the end of their legs, depending on if they're on something that they could use their claws, or they have to use their suckers to walk around on something smooth. We'll go on the next one. This is really an interesting part of the bee that if you ever get where everything that's going on here, I'd say you'd have to be a biologist, really. But basically, the honey stomach, a honeybee has 3 stomachs. They have the first place that the anything comes is the honey stomach. This is where they'll separate the nectar from other things they want to pass on. And once it passes here, the food and the water and anything else the bee needs for body functions is passed into the stomach, where it is processed. And then this area is also considered a stomach. It's the 3rd stomach. This is where they store their waste until they can exit the hive for a cleansing flight. But this honey stomach, on the back side of it here, before it heads on down, one thing I was reading late last night, it's got some things that they described it as teeth. And it's like a strainer that will actually strain out little bits of pollen and this and that. It works 2 ways. It goes this way or that way. They can pass it through and then restrict it from coming back, or filter their nectar, or whatever they want to do just by operating those teeth or gates back and forth. Okay, this is a pretty good depiction of the size of bees. When you see your worker bees, they'll be about this side, and that's about like a queen. Look, that's about like a drone. Well, A worker bee, of course, everybody knows, will sting you. That's a little female bee. And she is made with barbed stinger. In other words, when she stings you, and I got a good slide here coming up that Roger Nichols, after I'd given a presentation, it was about 2015 or 16, told me about how a bee stinger worked, and I didn't know at the time, but it's fascinating. But anyway, the worker bees has a barbed stinger. A queen bee has a stinger, and it's a smooth barb because she starts, and we'll get into that later, like her, but somewhere during the process, she is not in need of a serrated or a barbed stinger, and hers is smooth. And of course, the drones, they don't have any stinger at all. Next slide. This is the one I was telling you about. This is a really good picture of a stinger. If you look at this closely, you can see how that baby just keeps digging in there and digging. And this happens, in probably just a matter of a couple of seconds. So, the main thing you want to do when you get stung with a bee, and if you keep bees very long, you're going to do it. You want to get right up here with your thumbnail or your hive tool or something and pull that stinger out just the way that bee's dragging. Just get that stinger out as quick as you can, because actually what happens, it'll pull out the stinger, of course, and it'll pull out a little bit of this venom sac, and it'll pull out a little bit of this muscle. And what happens, the nerves just keep going for just a few seconds and will keep pumping that venom into you. That's why it's so important to pull that out. Next slide. Worker bee pheromones. Remember, we talked about the queen bee pheromones, how she can give direction to the colony and keeps them orderly and everything's going good. Well, the worker bees also have a pheromone. One pheromone that comes to mind to me is that I've learned time and time again is once you get stung, you need to get covered up. If you get one sting, I always like to start out my beekeeping with no gloves. And my wife will tell you, until I get about 6 or 8 stings, I'm pretty good shape. But once I get that first one, I'd be a lot smarter just to go get my glove, because once they sting you, they're not going to stop. They're going to come after you until you change something. So if you can, get away from them a little bit. If you do get stung, that helps sometimes. Another thing you want to watch about honeybees, we learned, is you can learn a lot about honeybees just by looking at them. If they're looking at you, that's not a bad thing for them. I mean, they're defensive is what I'm saying. If they're looking at you, you could be in trouble. So what you want to do is just leave them alone. I mean, walk away for a minute, maybe give them a little puff of smoke, and just be careful. And they also have some other pheromones. They have what they call the Nasonov gland. It's a gland that it's a gland that or a pheromone that serves an orientation. And there's all kinds of different pheromones for bees that has them do different things, with their nursing duties and this and that. But basically, a pheromone is a smell or a chemical smell that has the bees do one thing or another. Now, I used to call this 3 members of a colony, but found out it's not really a member as much as it is a cast. But anyway, you have basically three. You got the worker bees, and I don't know, about 99.4% of your colony probably is worker bees. And then you've got your drone bee, and a big hive will have a couple hundred drone bees probably at its peak, or maybe more. And then typically you're going to have one queen bee. So I've heard of hives with more than one queen, especially during when they're swarming. There might be a young virgin in there, or a couple of them together, at the same time. But that's your 3 members: your worker, your drone, and your queen. Now we got the life cycle of a bee, and if you're going to keep bees, this is something you really need to know the life cycle of your bees, because when you open up your hive, so many times if you keep bees, you're going to run into problems and you're going to see things. Well, you need to know about this life cycle so you can get an idea, at least, of where the queen bee, if she was a queen, this worked. But if this is a queen bee, where she went to, you know. All bees, well, maybe we need to go to that next one. All bees, the queen bee, the worker bee, and the drone bee will spend, I mean, it takes 3 days. Once the queen lays that egg, it takes 3 days for that egg to hatch into a larva. Now, the worker bee and the queen bee start out exactly the same way as fertilized eggs. But because of the royal jelly that this queen gets, it changes her. And her larva stage goes from 5.5, or from 6 days down to 5.5 days versus the worker bee. And that is because of the royal jelly. And then she also has 7.5 days as a pupa. See, that's a lot shorter than 12 days for a total. And I got some stuff here on my screen again I can't get rid of. For a total of 16 days. And versus now, if you look at the worker bees, it's the same 3 days and 6, but they got 12 days, that's 21. And a drone bee, which is a unfertilized egg, has a total of 24. This is a good picture, a well magnified picture of eggs and brood. Look how pretty them little eggs are standing up right there in the bottom. And we can see some little bitty young larvae. If you was doing any grafting, you'd want to go for that little bittiest larva, I think. But that's a good picture of larvae and eggs. That's called open brood. And this is cap brood. Everybody can see how the brown cappings are on there. Once the larva goes into the final stage, it's capped, pupated under these cappings.
Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
On your screen, there's a little box that says, please move this window away from the shared application.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. Do I just hold it and drag it?
I think so.
I can't figure out how to get it off. Is it off now?
It's off now. It may come back though. We'll see.
Or not?
Yeah, trying to come back.
Stay off of these. Off of the Zoom buttons.
Is that any better?
Looks like it. I don't see it anymore. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Technology, folks.
Okay, here we have it's really what I would call a classic frame. This is just, it's got everything. Look here at the honey. It's got capped honey. It's got pollen. And somewhere in there, there'll be, oh, here's the nectar. No, that's open brood. There'll be nectar somewhere close there too for the brood. And down here is open brood. This is the older larva. And then the cap brood. And this explains it a little bit better. This shows the nectar in here close to the pollen, so they can either get the protein or carbohydrates. Your carbohydrates are your nectar. That's where they get their carbs, is in the nectar of honeybee. And pollen is their protein. This is a good frame I've always enjoyed. This is a good frame of brood up here to talk about. You can see all these flat cappings. That's going to be your worker brood. And then you're going to see this bumpy looking stuff. That's your drone brood. And I don't see any queen cells in that one, but down here's a little queen cell. This one's probably a supersedure. They probably had something go on. It's in the middle of a comb. And this is just another picture of drone. This is a picture of some queen cups. All your frames are gonna, a lot of your frames, it's normal to have queen cups. When you gotta start worrying when you see eggs or larvae in there and they're starting to develop, pull them on out, then you got problems. But we talked a little bit a while ago about a queen and how she starts out as a worker bee. And all your bees, your worker, your queen, and your drone get royal jelly the first 3 days. But the difference in the queen is she gets that royal jelly clear up until the time that she is fully developed as a larva and just before she pupates. And that's enough for her to totally change her completely. Thanks, Argo. These are some swarm cells. These are on the bottom of the frame, and who knows? I mean, looking at that frame, it's got some problems. But these are queen cells, swarm cells on the bottom, and it looks to me like they've already left. And when you go into a hive like this, remember I was saying this is not a great frame to look at, but when you go into a hive like that, and first thing you want to look for is eggs and young larvae. That's what I do, because I know how long it's been. I want to know how long it's been since the queen was there, if there's any kind of problems. And as you learn more about it, you can judge by the size of the larva, and you just get to get a feel for it, you know. And here's some signs of a failing queen. If you see a lot of dry comb, you see a lot of just a few bees, no eggs or larvae. This hive's definitely got problems right here. And you know, there's a lot of things that could go into that. It could be she's getting old, she was injured, she could have been killed by the beekeeper. You know, you don't know. This is an example of a strong hive. I'm going to say, just going by the title here, that has lost its queen, and they were able to recover very quickly. So what they did is they took the most ideal larva that they ever had in the hive, and they drew it out and made a queen cell. And that is now going to make a queen. Now, this is something I had my first year or two, and I didn't know what the heck was going on. But remember, we looked at those queen eggs, the eggs that the queen had laid. They was all right there at the bottom of the comb, and pretty much right in the middle and standing up. Well, your worker bees, a lot of times their abdomens are not long enough to reach the bottom, so they'll deposit them wherever, here, there, or they fall out. They'll fall wherever. Whereas a queen, she will gently place that egg right at the very bottom. But laying workers are characterized by multiple eggs, random pattern, just wherever she's going to lay them wherever. And if you see that, you need to get you another queen. Beekeeper years ago, old Cecil Sweeney, I didn't know what was going on. I went over and explained it to him. He told me, and he told me how to take care of it. And I was willing to pay for a queen, but he'd give me a queen bee he had there in one of his little castles, And I went home and done a newspaper divide, and that hive made it for at least a while more. I remember this queen, we didn't talk about the worker bee much about how long they live, but typically in the summer months, a worker bee is going to live, 4 or 5 weeks, something like that, 6 weeks at the most, I'd say. And remember, I told you that the queen starts out exactly the same as a worker bee as far as the egg. Well, this is the difference. Once that extra royal jelly that she gets, she can live from just 3 months or 2 months from 2 to 5 years. And at the height of her, I guess, youth, when she was really going good, and it's a good part of the year, she can lay up to 1,500 eggs a day. And I don't, I'd like to see that sometime, because I've watched the queen in a observation hive, and they just don't move very fast. And 1,500 a day, they could never stop. This is a guy that everybody likes, and like I said, he develops from an unfertilized egg. Drones develop from an unfertilized egg, and their only purpose in life is to mate. They can't feed themselves. A lot of times they need help getting out of the cell. They just got it. They got it good, I guess, until fall. The worker bee is the same as a female bee. She's a female, but not fertile. And there's, like I said, most of your bees in a colony are your worker bee. Now, bees, when they first emerge in an adult, and this is just kind of gives you an idea, nothing's set in stone, but it's been researched a lot over the years, and basically young bees are going to work in the hive, and as they get older, they're going to go out and forage, and that just about tells it all. It's, a bee's life can be, I've heard it described, you can do it in 3 equal segments of 21 days, and that's about right. It takes, for a worker bee, it takes 21 days from the time the egg is laid until the adult emerges, and then they've got about 21 days in the hive, working in the hive, and then after that, for the rest of the time, they're doing this. They're foraging the nectar, pollen, propolis, water. They're just doing all kinds of duties. This is just a little graph that shows kind of how the adult population, if you look closely, and this will all be available, but it shows the population, how the bees, where it intersects, goes up and down. So it's so important right in here to get it up there, because this is where you're going to be making honey. And here you see, but your adult population is going down, or the brood population is going down, but we want to come back up to make that. We want to keep the brood population up so we can keep the adult population up. This is an interesting slide too. the bees actually, well, you can read it here, but it's just, it starts out as a drip of moisture. And they just chew it up and make it pliable. They use their feet. They can use their mandibles to chew on it. This is some examples of some wax right here. Now, this is always an interesting one to me too. And I've seen this a little bit out in front. I guess it's what they're doing. But sometimes you'll see them are in the hive. They'll do a little dance. And it has to do with the sun and the way they orient. It's what they figured out over time, you know. Not doggone it. You silly button. I wish I could get that. Nope. And this bees are just like any other creature. We need a dry place to stay. We need food, and we got to take care of the bad stuff. And remember, when we talked about this, we talked about how they got their antenna and their hairy bodies to help them. And this is what they want to. We didn't talk too much about bee space. Bee space in the wild or in the colony or anything is 3/8 of an inch. Is everybody? That's all I've ever heard. 3/8 of an inch. If it's less than 3/8 of an inch, they're going to block it up with propolis. Okay. If it's more than 3/8 of an inch, they're going to draw out honeycomb to 3/8 of an inch bee space. So that's why bee space is so important in hives, because you get Burcomb anyway, just the design of the Langstroths between one box and the other. But you know, if you don't keep that bee space right, you get a real mess. Okay. And this, I don't need to read it to you. Everybody can see this. And one thing that's really important to me is this last one. When all goes well, the beekeeper harvests the reserve stores, leaving adequate food supply for daily maintenance and overwinter success. And that's so important. You know, you gotta get your bees fattened up in the fall all you can. And you just want to give them plenty of food and some ventilation and a windbreak and hope for the best, you know. I mean, some of it's up to them, you know. And there's we can talk about swarming a lot, but boy, I tell you what, it's pretty hard when they decide they want to swarm. You can do things to deter it, you know. Certainly, what we do a lot, I think it's helped us quite a bit. I don't think we've had a terrible problem with swarming. Is we do Grant Gillard's, the name evades me now, but you put a frame in between two frames early in the year. And that works real good early in the year, and a good way to get frames drawn out quickly too. I think that's about it, folks. I don't know how I'm doing for time, but anybody hear me?
Yeah,
Did they
I can
lose
hear
me,
you,
Randy?
Tom.
Yeah, Tom, that was great. I think we heard you fine. We do have one question here from, I think it's from Corinne, asking about, I guess that with the please move window segment of the of the presentation, you were talking about capped brood. And she was asking if you could just sort of retell a little bit about capped brood.
Okay, I will. I see that now. I just opened that up. Basically, what capped brood, let's start out with brood. Brood, to me, is your young bees, where eggs, larvae, and pupa, which is capped brood. That's what capped brood is the pupa stage. Remember, a queen lays an egg, and it's an egg for 3 days. And then it hatches into a larva. And based on whether it's a queen bee or a drone bee or a worker bee, it has X number of days as a larva. At the end of the larva stage, it is capped in order to pupate. That means it goes from, it's a metamorphosis. It changes from a critter that looks like a cricket into a honeybee. It's the best way I know to explain it. Does that help you any?
Thank you, Tom. Always interesting. Look forward to this every year. So we'll need to get the